Welcome to the WXOU Sports YouTube page. My name is Harjun Buttar, and we are joined with a once-in-a-lifetime interview with Oakland men's basketball head coach Greg Kampe. Thank you so much for joining us, Coach.
My pleasure. Always here for you. Anytime you need me, I'll come in.
You've been a busy man ever since the tournament ended, and you've been kind of cooking up some things in the off-season, recruiting. What can you tell us, just emotionally, what's going on with your team right now?
Well, it's kind of a sad but happy. It's the best of days, the worst of days. I guess the old book title was or whatever. It's the best of days because you're out there celebrating an unbelievable season, a nice run in the tournament. Everybody's, congratulating you, and a lot of kids out there are interested in the school and that. And it's the worst of times because a great team is leaving, and a couple of the players on the team are going to move on. Went in portal, and they're going to make a lot of money that we can't pay them. So that's a hard part for me to see Chris Conway and Trey Townsend go play somewhere else next year. It's a tough deal, but it's the game today. It's the way it is. It's happening on every campus in the country. So we're just trying to navigate it and figure out how to work it the best.
We're sitting here about 6 weeks after a momentous win by Oakland. It's May 2nd. March 21st was a day to remember. Obviously, the days immediately following the win over Kentucky were crazy. Now reflecting on it after some time, have the emotions changed after that win, or are you able to kind of soak it in a little bit more?
Yeah, I personally, it was hard for me because of the loss to NC State. We were 10 seconds away from the Sweet 16. Game's tied, 10 seconds to go. We got the ball and we don't get a shot off. Now, I probably would be able to handle it better if we had gotten a shot and it didn't go in and we lose in overtime. But to have not gotten a shot, I blame myself for that. I think that's a coaching error, to be that close, and it just, so that's been really, really bugging me. I every night since then, and as you said, 6 weeks or whatever it's been, there isn't a night that goes by that doesn't dwell in my mind. I don't wake up thinking about it, those types of things. So it kind of skewed up the excitement of the win and everything. The immediate 48 hours after that win were probably the only other time in my career that it was anything like that was in 2005 when we went to the tournament for the first time. And we were a 7 seed, which had a losing record at that year. We had the worst record of any team that ever made it to the NCAA tournament. So Pierre Dukes made a shot, we won, and the whole world went nuts because nobody had ever even heard of Oakland before. So those 48 hours after were crazy, but so were these 48 hours. I mean, we beat the Dallas Cowboys of the college basketball. I mean, the world. You either love Kentucky or you dislike Kentucky, and most of the world doesn't like them, And so we were everybody's favorite person for a couple days.
You were in front of a lot of cameras and in front of a lot of microphones immediately following that win. Does any interview stick out to you as, this was a great interview, great interviewer that, you can kind of bring to the front of your memory?
No, I think that it was such a whirlwind that you just kept going. I mean, Scott Van Pelt and sports. Scott's a good friend of mine, so to go on Sports Center with him was, I think, that you like that when you're comfortable with someone you know and trust, and it's cool that we have a relationship with somebody, but now all of a sudden we were the lead story. He had I can't remember if it was Trey or Golke. I think it was probably Golke, and I on to lead Sports Center that night. Good Morning America was pretty cool. And then Jack and I did Barkley and the TBS, their pregame on Friday's games. Before Friday's game, Jack and I did a spot with Ernie and Kenny Smith and Clark and Barkley. So I think those were probably the three that stood out the most, just because I think those are the three that all college basketball. Well, Good Morning America's not, but Sports Center, leading Sports Center, and then that one. I think most college basketball fans watch that, so it's kind of cool to get Oakland, to have our university be talked about in those atmospheres. I think that was cool.
So going a little bit further back, you won the Horizon League championship in early March, your first one in 13 years. Not saying that there was any sort of pressure on you, but did you feel any relief after finally winning a a tournament?
Yeah, I think that's a very legitimate question. And, if you look at the totality of the last 20 years, in 2005, as we just talked about, we won our conference tournament. And we went on and won 3 in 6 years. And we had just gone Division One. We had just become eligible for the NCAA tournament in 2003. So to do that immediately and get 3 times there, it almost felt like it was a right for Oakland to be there. I mean, why shouldn't we be doing this? And it's very, very difficult to do, but we were doing it. So, and then we had some great teams. I mean, Kay Felder came through here, Kendrick Nunn came through here, Sharon Dorsey Walker, Martez Walker. We had some great players and some great teams come through here. Jamal Kane, Jalen Moore, and we didn't win the conference tournament. And, we had heartbreak and, we got beat on one possession shot. I think we had 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row that it was a one possession game with, under 5 seconds to go. The one year when Drew McDonald made a 3, we had a 2-point lead as he made a 3 as the horn went off. I mean, there's just so many heartbreaks that you could look at. And from my standpoint, it was relief because there was a whole group of Oakland students, a whole group of Oakland fans over that 12-year period that we didn't get in, that didn't get to experience it. And my whole thing with this, my biggest thing about us winning this year was that our fans got to beat their chest, and we were in the tournament longer than Michigan State, and we were in and Michigan wasn't in, so our fans got to beat their chest and say, look at us, and be true fans, and not be the little brother and all that kind of stuff. So that 10 years was hard, really hard, and it was hard because we had really good teams. I mean, the one year we won the league regular season, we lost to Youngstown State, the number 8 seed, on a fluke play at the end of the game. And then we went to Clemson in the NIT and won. That team could have won NCAA tournament games too. And Kay Felder's last year here, that team could have won NCAA tournament games. So it was frustrating to me because I had these teams that were so good, and then we couldn't get through the tournament. But it isn't easy, If you look at the numbers since 2005, we've won 4 postseason conference tournaments. That's the same number Michigan State's won in the Big Ten. Michigan's won 3. Eastern Michigan's won none. Detroit's won 1. Western Michigan's won 1. Central Michigan's won 1. So if you just look through the landscape of college basketball in the state of Michigan, it shows you how hard it is to win that tournament. We've done it 4 times in 20 years. So it isn't, you step back from it and look at it analytically and you say, wow, we've done great. But when you're in the midst of a 12-year run and not doing it, when you've had some really good teams, it's frustrating. It hurt. And, yeah, I admit there was a lot of relief.
You talked about, bringing in good players and building good teams. And a lot of that has come with, how you've been able to work the transfer portal and your recruiting before the change happened. But when that change happened, you were almost prophetic. Sports Illustrated quoted you saying, if you're building for the future, you're not going to have a job, or something along the lines of that. What did you see changing in the college basketball landscape that gave you an inclination that I can't continue to recruit freshmen and recruit very young people, and I have to start changing the way that I build my basketball teams?
Well, when we lost Javen Cumberland and Braden Norris to the transfer portal, I would say 2018 or 19, the transfer portal had just happened. I went on vacation, It was late in the process. They've changed the rules now. There's a transfer portal window and all that, but at that time it had just started, and um, so I went on vacation, and while I was gone, they went in, and they didn't have to get my approval. They could just go in. It's been a step-by-step process to get where we are now. That devastated our program. We were poised to be picked either first or second in the league the following year. We were poised to win a championship and maybe go to an NCAA tournament. And you took our starting backcourt, and they were gone. And it was too late in the recruiting period to really go out and replace them with quality players. And so that was a slap in the gut. And we, I was a little bitter about it when it happened. I didn't like it and that. But as we went through it, you realize that that's the wave of the future. And so you can bitch about it, and I did. But nowadays, it's become commonplace, and it happened to us early enough that we were able to take the gut punch, step back from it, and say, okay, how can we fix this? And we've got to understand and realize that there is no program anymore. There's only teams. It's not, your program isn't, you build, as you just said, for the future. You've got to build your team year by year. And so we took that philosophy a couple years ago, and right now it seems to be working. We brought in 7 new guys this past year, and look what we did. We're going to bring in 8 or 9 this year. And I don't like it, but I don't want to be the old man that's telling his kids, I used to walk, 3 miles to school in snow every day. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that's happy and winning games and has his team winning. So the foresight of it was, I think, when Norris and Cumberland left, I think, going through the heartache of that, and then realizing, okay, we're not going to be in this position anymore. We're going to try and figure this out and be prepared, and that's what we've done.
This one might be a little bit hard for you to answer, but we're going to try to give it a shot. It's a stat you've heard number of times before, longest tenured active Division I basketball coach. I know you're probably more sick than anyone of hearing that, but I would say the top 10 longest tenured active college basketball coaches, you have found the most talent in the transfer portal. And of course, coaches like Tom Izzo and Bill Self, they're going to continue to find great freshmen and top tier players coming out of high school. But they haven't adapted to finding players in the transfer portal. Now, this may be kind of intersecting with what you said earlier, but what do you think has allowed you to adapt faster than coaches who have grown up in a similar time and have, come to accept a similar way of coaching basketball?
Well, I think we got the gut shot earlier than they did. I think Izzo right now understands that, this is the way it's going to be, and I know he recruited Trey Townsend, and we've talked numerous times, so obviously, they're coming around to it, but our gut shot happened early. When Norris and Cumberland left, all the fans are they're going, well, something must be wrong at Oakland. They must hate it there. They must hate Kampe. They must, he must treat them bad. Because the whole world didn't understand it at that time. And now, you look at every team. Duke, how does Duke lose their whole team? Their whole team went into transfer portal. That's just the way it is. The reason the kids are doing it is that they're going in there to find out what their worth is. If I stay here at Duke or at Oakland, I'm not going to be able to know what am I worth, and is Oakland really paying me? We're not paying much, so obviously, yeah, we're not. But the Duke, is Duke paying me enough? I'm going to go out there and see if they're paying me $200,000 and I can get $400,000 over here. So that's why kids are doing this. And when it first happened, it wasn't, the fan bases and the message boards and all that were like, what's going on at Oakland? And it happened at Cleveland State before it actually happened at Oakland, and it cost Gary Waters his job. He had 3 great players leave. And, so when it happened to us, it happened before it would happen to Kansas and those things. So that's why we got to jump on it. Now that it's happening at those places, now they're going to figure it out too. But what I said, when this first happened, I said, I don't want to be the Toledo Mud Hens of college basketball, right? We're not here to be a development. We're here to win games. We're here to go to a Sweet 16 to get to the NCAA tournament. That's what we're doing here. So we're not going to be the Detroit Tigers farm system, right? We're not going to be the Mud Hens. So that's when we went away from, okay, we're going to, right now our recruiting philosophy is we're going to take a high school kid probably once a year, maybe none in 1 year and 2 the next, but we're going to average over a 4 or 5 year period, 1 per year, right? And we're not going to bring in a bunch of them, develop them, and then have them leave us. That's not what we're here for. And so we're going to use the portal to our advantage. We're going to get old. We wanted to get old, and we wanted to stay old. And that was what I said 2 or 3 years ago when we made this change in recruiting. We're going to get old, and we're going to stay old. And I think being old is the reason we beat Kentucky. We're averaging 21, 22 years old. They're averaging 18-year-old. I don't care how talented you are. If we're 3 or 4 years older than you, we've got a really good chance to beat you.
So this is interesting, and you kind of answered this question, but now that you've kind of focused into making your team older, what role do players coming out of high school that you're going to bring into Oakland play for your basketball team?
Well, Cooper Craig 2 years ago was one of the few freshmen. We redshirted him. He got injured this year, but he's grown and developed. And we're probably, if he has the type of year or two that I think he's going to have over the next 2 years, we'll probably lose him too. He's a little undersized, so maybe not. Maybe because he's undersized, the Big Ten won't think he can play there. But I just know that, they got to come in. They've got to have thick skin because they're going to be, the only kid in their class. And then they've got to want to be great. We have a saying around Oakland, everybody wants to be great until they find out what they have to do to become great. I say that probably 1,000 times a year. And we have to teach them what they have to do to become great, and then we're going to develop those. We're just not, it's not like we don't want to develop anybody. We're just going to develop, a very small number. And then if we lose them in a couple years, so be it. But we're not going to, we're not going to replace kids we're losing with young guys. We want to replace kids we're losing with older, more mature. We want to get old and stay old.
Okay. So you can stop me from asking this if it's too classified, but I want to talk a little bit about your recruiting strategy. Not necessarily your tactics, not necessarily what specific role you want your players to play in the system, but whenever we see on the news or in a press conference what college basketball or college football coaches are looking for from their recruits, they kind of say the cookie cutter answers. What specifically are you looking for in an Oakland basketball player that cannot be seen in a Northern Kentucky basketball player, that cannot be seen in a Milwaukee basketball player? You've been around these schools long enough to kind of understand what they're about. What can you provide insight about that?
Well, I think it's not in the university. It's not in a Northern Kentucky player. It's in the coach. I think every coach values things. Every human being values things in relationships, in the job area, and that, every boss is different. Everybody, what do you value, right? And so in a basketball player, I value number one is shooting. And I think that's unique. I don't think, although Danny Hurley, the coach at UConn, and whenever a team's won back-to-back national championships, they kind of become the flavor of the month, right? Everybody's looking at them and saying, well, they're doing it. How are they doing it? This is how we got to do it. And he came out after that and said that he values shooters. He wants shooters. If you look at Oakland and Greg Kampe's history, we've always had shooters. And that's probably the number one thing that I value. I want my players to be able to shoot the ball. I want to shoot the three. I want to play at a pace where you can get open threes. That's number one. Number two is I value elite workers. right? And so we have to dive in, do a deep dive into them and see what their off the court work ethic is and how everyone wants to be great till you find out what you have to do to become great. Do they want to become great? And that's a deep dive into it. The third thing that I value is rebounding. You know, we're going to recruit shooters. We're going to recruit rebounders. And then the fourth thing, which might be the most important thing, is I want great teammates. I want people with high character that are great teammates. And so those are my four core values in recruiting. The difference between, let's say, an Oakland and a Michigan State or a Duke is that I can't go out there and look at Joe recruit and say I want him because he's the best player in the country, right? I'm not going to get the best player in the country, although that's changing. And not that it's changing for Oakland, but it's changing. It used to be that the best player in the country wanted to go to Duke. They wanted to go to Michigan State, Kentucky, the Blue Bloods, right? North Carolina, Kansas. Now they want to go where they're going to get paid the most money. And, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, if you were a recruit, I would sit down with you, and the first question you'd ask me is, can you make me a pro? Can you get me to the NBA? That would be what the first question a recruit would ask is. And my answer is sure. We've had 5 NBA players in the last 15 years. Raul Marshall, Keith Benson, Kay Felder, Jamal Cain, Kendrick Nunn. And those aren't guys that just had a cup of coffee. Kendrick Nunn's runner-up rookie of the year. So your second question would be, can you get to the NCAA tournament? Well, yeah, we've been there 3 times. Now, we haven't been there recently, but we've been there 3 times. So, yeah, if you're good enough, we'll get there. Your third question would be about facilities and that, and then I would, our facilities aren't that great, but I can get you the tournament, I can get you the NBA. Now, the first question a recruit asks is, what are you going to pay me? We just lost Trey Townsend and Chris Conway because they're going to get paid. They're going to get, Chris. The rumor is that Trey got $500,000 at Arizona, and he's going to make more money than I do, which is good for him. And Conway, I'm understanding, has been offered $350 a car and all his food and all that kind of stuff. So, that they're going to go and take that instead of going to Duke or North Carolina or Michigan State. And Trey could have gone to any of those schools. Trey could have gone anywhere he wanted to. He chose Arizona and a really nice paycheck.
All right, my program director is telling me we're running a little bit low on time, so we're going to switch course a little bit abruptly and talk a little bit more about you specifically.
Not a good topic.
What?
That's not a good topic.
Well, just in terms of you've been here so long that you oversaw the transition from Division II to Division I. Were there any changes that you made either voluntarily or just because of your situation in your coaching style and the way you approached, teaching and mentoring your players from Division II to Division I?
We went, not a lot of people have survived the it doesn't happen as much today as it did back when we were going to Division I. There were 280 Division I programs. Now there's 360. So there was this glut of Division II and Division III programs making the transition to Division I at the same time, and we were part of that wave. And very, very few coaches survived it. I can only think of a couple. The guy at Belmont survived it. Ron Hunter survived it at IUPUI. He's now at Tulane. But the majority of coaches that were in that wave lost their jobs, and because it was such a huge step. For me, we won the Mid-American Conference, which is the league we went into when we went from Division II to Division I. We won it in year 1, and that was that might have been done one other time, maybe 2 times now. So that gave me a grace period. Well, geez, this guy is, and then we went through a tough time like everybody else when you make that transition. And I'm sure there were I know there were people that wanted my butt out of here. The message boards were full of that. The there was an article written, that it's time for me to go on and that, and I just never really listened to all that kind of stuff. I just stuck with the process, and we had to change because your players are different. We're much more talented, and it's Division II. There's some really good teams and good players in that, but it's not the same business as Division I. The rules are different, and it's a cutthroat business. And I've changed a lot over the years, as anybody that's done their job for 40 years has had to change, otherwise they wouldn't still have it.
This is going to be the last question. You can give multiple answers if you want, but
okay.
You've been here, again, I'm going to say the stat again, longest active head coach in Division I basketball. You've seen a lot. You coached against a lot of great coaches, most recently Coach Calipari, I think Bill Self, and then on a regular basis, Tom Izzo. Is there anyone, either former or current, a coach that you would have loved to have coached against?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I did not coach against Krzyzewski, and that was because I wasn't going to play Duke. Early on, we tried to set up a game with Duke, and their assistant coach was just an arrogant ass. And I just said, okay, I'm never playing you guys. I'm never playing Duke. It wasn't him. It was his assistant, but that guy represented him. So that's the one place that we haven't been. But I think, as I look back at it, I think we pretty much played all the great coaches. Maybe John Thompson. I never got to coach against John Thompson, the famous coach from Georgetown. He was such a misunderstood person. He was such a he set change. He walked out and refused to coach a game over an academic issue. He was a guy that changed the game of college basketball. I watched his teams play, but I really never got to be a head coach against him. And Jimmy Valvano might be somebody else I would have liked to coached against. But again, those names are older, and neither one of them are alive anymore. And I think it's funny because there's a saying in the coaching business, when somebody says who's the best coach in the country, most coaches will say themselves and three dead guys. So here I am saying who would I coach against, two guys that are no longer with us. But I think it's because we pretty much, I coached against Bobby Knight as an assistant. I never went head-to-head against him. But Denny Crum at Louisville was a great coach. And I got to meet John Wooden. I got to shake John Wooden's hand. My son, when he was about 6 years old, we played UCLA, and he was at the game. And so I got to shake his hand, and my son got to meet him. So, I think we've pretty well checked off all the great places to play. One of the things isn't so much the coaches, it's the arenas. It's playing in all the great places of college basketball. And if you got a second, I'll tell you my favorite place in the country to play is Fog Allen Fieldhouse. I think anybody that ever coaches should have to coach a team and go to Fog Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas and play Kansas and hear that crowd, the Rock Chalk Jayhawk chant and all that kind of stuff. It's just probably the coolest place we've ever been.
Well, I think that's going to be it for us, Coach. Really appreciate you coming out. It was a rainy day, so I think that kind of made it all the more special. You can check out this interview on our WXOU Sports YouTube page. We have a whole bunch of content on there, full game broadcasts, interviews just like this one, post-game broadcaster recaps, and player interviews. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.